Thank you very much for joining us. This is the AltDev Student Summit. If you look below your video, there is a link to ask questions on this session, and you can also join in the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag #AltDevConf. We are very pleased to present today Jurie Horneman, who is going to talk about a day in the life of a creative director. So without further interruption, take it away, Jurie.
Hi, thanks, Luke. Yes, so I'm going to talk about a day in the life of being a creative director, what I do. Whoops, and immediately going to the wrong slide. There we go. So, my name is Jurie. I've been making games for a very long time and for various companies, and I am currently the creative director of Mipumi Games, a company based in Vienna, Austria, that I co-founded in 2009 together with some former co-workers from Rockstar Games here in Vienna. And we're doing all kinds of games for all kinds of platforms. We currently have 16 people in the office, and as you may have guessed, I'm the creative director. So, what does that mean, creative director? I know basically three kinds of creative directors, right? They're the sort of the fancy game designers. It's, as far as I can tell, a different way of saying lead game designer. So you call that creative director or game director or whatever. So very big companies have this, and I'm not entirely sure if there's a real difference between creative director and lead game designer. Then if you have a company that's big enough that you have a matrix management structure, then you have some people who are responsible for the project and others who are responsible for a discipline or a department. And there you would have a creative director, and the creative director might be in charge of, let's say, get all the game designers, or all the game designers and all the artists, etc., etc. That's the way we did it at Rockstar Games in Vienna, where we had 100 people. I am not that kind of creative director. I am the senior person in a small company creative director. And that means that when I co-founded the company, I said, well, you know, we need to do business cards. I'd really like that to say creative director, and that's how I became the creative director. Now I've been doing it for 4 years, so I have a track record, right? Suddenly I have a credibility. So, and the nice thing about this is that if you're a student, you want to get into the industry, this is a really good way of becoming a creative director, right? There's no gatekeeper. There's no you don't have to ask permission to anyone. Of course, there are, like, you know, expectations and then the responsibilities that you sort of need to deal with. But yeah, there's no one is stopping you, except maybe all the other co-founders who also want to be creative director. No one's stopping you from doing this. Anyway, what do I do? So I started listing this, and I started with, okay, I'm a lead game designer. Normally, if you have some kind of management job, you don't also get involved in production, you know, like fully involved in a game. But we're small, so we kind of have to do that. And so I'm a lead game designer. I'm fully involved in one project. I write and maintain game design documentation. I create content. I lead and manage other designers, and I'm involved in planning, etc., etc. I also write pitches. I'm not the only one in the company to do that. And in fact, there's very little in the company that where I'm the only one to do it. But I do write pitches. I come up with game concepts. I look at RFPs, you know, requests for proposals, and then I flesh that out. I come up with game designs. I come up with budgets and timelines and milestones, and put it all together into a nice document. And then send it off, and hopefully someone will give us a lot of money. I do biz dev. Again, I'm not the only one to do that, but I do a lot of it. I represent the company at BizDev events. So in a couple of weeks, I'll be going to Paris to Game Connection Europe, and I'll be spending something like 3 days in over 50 meetings of half an hour each, and try to talk people into, again, giving us money or you know, doing deals with us. I am a webmaster in the sense that I build and maintain the Mipumi website. And if you know our company and you know our website, you'll realize that I have not been doing this for a while because it's woefully out of date. But still, that's something that I do. I occasionally produce stuff. We do bigger projects, smaller projects. Sometimes if it's a smaller project and I'm sort of I have the entire project in my head anyway, I'll also do the producing on that. So this summer we did a 3-person, 2-week little project, and I was the producer and on that, and I also was the coder on that, and I actually do a reasonable amount of programming, even though that's not really in my job description. But it usually is the best way of going about it. For instance, I do most of the tool development because I happen to have a knack for that. I do most of the HTML, CSS, JavaScript development for our titles. Because there's not a lot of it, and it happens to be a hobby of mine, so I do that. And I learned ActionScript and C# and Unity, and I occasionally write some code, user-facing code and actual gameplay code. So I do that as well. I am, what counts as upper management in a 16-person company. So I'm involved in a lot of big meetings where we look at contracts, we talk about HR. All that kind of stuff. We make big decisions about the future of the company, etc. So and yes, etc. There's other smaller stuff, but there's basically I wear a lot of hats, and so do a number of other people in the company. And this is one of the things that I found the most striking about my work as a creative director when I started thinking about this for this talk. I wear a lot of hats, even more than I used to, and I already was kind of like a producer / designer / programmer, and now suddenly I do even more, and that is something that I want to talk about now in a little bit more detail. What it takes to wear a lot of hats. So basically, I believe it takes 3 things. You have to be able to go outside your comfort zone. You have to deal with stuff, and I'll talk about what that means, and you have to at least try to be a good person. And I'm certainly not claiming that I am a good person, but I do try to be. So, comfort zone. Communication is incredibly important, and the more you the more you become involved in managing and leading, the more communication becomes important, and that means everything from writing good emails, writing good documents, to standing up in front of the entire company and talking to them, also doing one-on-one talks, doing the small meetings, being able to manage meetings, being able to tell people stuff they don't want to hear, making sure that they actually understood what you were saying, talking to people who are in different disciplines, but also even talking to people from completely different industries, or to clients, people from other companies. There's an incredible amount of communication involved, and if you start off as, say, a programmer, a designer, or an artist, and maybe that's not your focus, but it really becomes very important at some point. So you have to go outside your comfort zone. There's law. Some legal issues become important. Contracts that you sign with people who work for you or people that you work for. There's, for instance, something that I never would have expected is I wrote a clause in a contract that we did with a very big AAA publisher that specifies, what kind of localizations we are prepared to do and which ones we're not prepared to do. So that's sort of like half technical, half legal. And actually, I found that fun. So it was kind of interesting to learn that. Finances, obviously, in a small company, becomes very important. And you get a lot closer to that. It includes stuff like taxes, accounting. Even though I'm not, I'm not even within the company. I'm not even a person most familiar with this. But I do look at the numbers, and I do look at budgets, and I've done things like write documents for government grants, and you have to do sort of strange math because they need the math to be in a certain way. All that kind of stuff, and that's stuff that I hadn't done before. And suddenly I had to do it, and I found out I could do it, because I went outside of my comfort zone. PR, even though I do a lot less than my wife, who you heard speak just 30 minutes ago. I am the PR person. I am occasionally tweet on the Mipumi account. I talk to the press occasionally, and this was again something where like in 2009 or 2010, we decided, we should write a press release, our first big press release. And so I couldn't write it myself because it had to be in German, and my German is not good enough. So I had it written, and then I was sitting there with this document, and I was going like, well, how do I send this? And I had no clue. And I had to figure it out all by myself, more or less, and I did. And there's basically an agency that you pay a lot of money, and they send it to a whole bunch of people who don't really care. But for a first press release, that worked, and I realized that even though I have absolutely no clue about this, I can figure this out and I can do it. And again, I went outside my comfort zone, and it was okay. New development tasks. There have been some interesting things, like when a couple of months ago, our AAA publisher clients with a very important contract asked me, or basically asked us, like, hey, well, you've written this document for this submission to Sony, but there's this thing, like, are you sure that's what you want to say? Is this setting correct? And it turned out that everyone involved in the project who could have answered this question was either on holiday or ill. And I had to figure out Sony's TRC process in like an hour or something. And it turned out I looked at it and I called everyone I could call, and it turned out it was okay, and it all worked out fine. But that was something I'd never done before. So there's a lot of stuff like that. It's kind of fun. There's also automatically what this implies is, if you're wearing a lot of hats, there's a lot of context switching, and that's something that especially if you're a programmer, it's really bad for productivity. You're into something and then suddenly you're out of it and you have to get back into it again. But when you wear all these hats, you have to be able to switch context and deal with it, and you have to be really organized. You need to learn, just like with communication. You need to learn all these skills about how to handle a lot of email, how to make sure you don't forget stuff. How to set up a to-do list system, whatever, that works for you. And that is your responsibility. And suddenly there are these new tasks that you need to learn. So, yeah, that's about it for the comfort zone. Now, dealing with stuff. Stuff means dealing with change. Things change very rapidly, and it's usually not under your control. People leave, people fall ill, your client suddenly decides that, hey, maybe they don't want to do this project anyway, or maybe they want something else, and occasionally they will tell you beforehand, or sometimes they just go like, yeah, no, we're canceling this, and you have to then deal with this, and you have to communicate it to everyone else, right? So setbacks, right? And you have to deal with setbacks without, to quote the bard, losing your shit. You have to be very calm about this and go like, well, there's a setback, and here's how we're going to deal with it. Even if the setback is, mistakes made by other people, by clients, by people that you work with. I think it's incredibly important for a company culture to have a really good way of dealing with mistakes, and to be very calm about it and go like, okay, there's a mistake. How do we make sure, how do we deal with this, and how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? And we do, I think, a pretty good job of that at Mipumi. What's even more important, you have to deal with your own mistakes, right? And that'll be the next slide, but that is also incredibly important. And you have to deal with discomfort. You have to be able to tell people, well, this thing you've been working on, we're going to throw that out, or we have to throw you out. This happens, and people naturally don't want to give people bad news or tell people that they did a bad job. Often people also don't like to tell people they did a good job. So positive feedback is not that common in the games industry that I've seen. But telling people that, usually when people screw up in a really bad way, then it's easy to go like, oh, you screwed up, and I now feel justified to fire you, or whatever. It's when people are like, it's okay, but they could do better, and then it becomes difficult to tell that to people. But you have to do it. You have to give people feedback. You have to be very clear about it. And if someone is not fitting in or is a problem, you have to fire them sooner rather than later, as unpleasant as it is. So that's something that you have to deal with. Then the third thing is, be a good person. And again, I'm not claiming to be a good person. I'm also not claiming that this is an exhaustive list of all the virtues to cultivate. But there are a couple that I think are important. One is patience. I am not naturally a patient person, but being a creative director of my own company has sort of given me this medium to long-term view, because I realized that, well, this first project is like, I would have laughed at it before I started this company, but now I'm really grateful that I did this. Our first project was a 7-game series of kids games for Nintendo DS for a laughably low budget. But we pulled it off with almost no crunching. It worked really well, and it generated cash flow and allowed us to sort of grow the company. And that is something that suddenly is like, hey, wow, this is actually very cool. And now in the next project, we'll be able to hire better people. Sorry, not better people, more people. And do these new things and learn these new technologies, so that we then have a certain reputation, and we have know-how, and that sort of really changed me to some degree, where before I would have gone like, why aren't we making amazing games, with, I don't know, AAA console quality right now, and I've sort of learned patience. Another thing that I try to learn, at least, is humility. You have to realize that you are fallible, whatever. You can make mistakes, and realize that others can make mistakes as well. And sometimes you have to sort of maybe try to spot mistakes before they are made, which I guess is not humility, but paranoia. Though Luke likes to call it spider sense, which is nicer, I guess. Humility also leads, I think, to respect. And respect is important for your communication and your interactions with other people both in that report to you, people that you work with, people in other companies. It's important to realize that usually everyone is trying to do a good job, and trying to do the best they can, and it's usually not actual outright incompetence or malice that's causing things to not be as cool as you would like them to be. Honesty is incredibly important, especially, first of all, people can tell. If you're working in the games industry, you're working with very smart people, and if you try to fool them, they can tell. And so it's best to be honest with them and be very open and transparent. To a certain degree, which I'm not going to go into, but if we've been in a situation where it's like, well, if this contract doesn't get signed by Friday and it's Thursday now, then we'll have to fire everyone, every employee in the company. And that's something that we didn't tell everyone in the company, right? So we were not honest about that. But I think that's better, because it's better that a couple of people are not able to sleep than everyone in the company. But even then, people knew that something was up, and people were worried. So honesty is a good thing. Also, honesty, being able to change your mind and being able to own up to mistakes publicly, in front of your other people that you work with, is something that is important. You have to be able to do that, because otherwise you'll just be you'll be too rigid, and you'll try to cover things up, and you're not being honest with yourself and not with your coworkers. So and that'll lead to all kinds of problems. And being honest to yourself is really one of the hardest things to do, but you have to try and do it. And there's another thing that I sort of realized over time, that is that when you're in school, or before you go to school, or when you're at university, you will automatically get feedback.
I think we lost Jurie. If you just wait.
I think we lost Jurie.
Oh, look, that's me echoing on the thing where I was checking. We lost Jurie. If you just give me 1 second, I'll try and get him back. Okay, Jurie has dropped out of the session, and I cannot raise him on Skype just now. So I'm assuming that his connection has died. Oh, here he is. Okay, we should be having him back in a second. This is what happens when you get live broadcasts. So let's see if we can get him back in. It's alright because we're not going to run over because we're having connection issues with the session that's following on from this one as well. So, awesome times. So I hope everybody's having fun. Here we go, Jurie's back.
Sorry.
Hey, Jurie.
Yeah. Sorry, I forgot the little checkbox that said, you know. Yeah. Anyway, I'm back.
Okay, right, I will shut up and let you get on with it then.
All right, I was almost done anyway, so let's see how much time. I'm doing okay for time. Yeah, courage, really important. So, let's see, was there anything else I wanted to say about courage? You know, it's obviously to go like, you know, for me to say like, oh, be courageous is very easy, but I did find it helped me to realize that when I occasionally, you know, feel resistance in myself towards doing something that goes outside of my comfort zone, then realizing that that's fear that I'm feeling, and also fearing, helps me. So maybe that helps you as well. Anyway, obviously being a good person is very hard, and you'll never stop. You know, you'll never achieve perfection. And this is sort of what it makes handling responsibility, which is really what I do as a creative director, hard. Paradoxically, there are some things about being a creative director that are incredibly easy. You know, people come to you and they need a decision, and you just go like, okay, and you make a decision. You know, because usually it doesn't matter that much. Just what matters is that someone makes a decision, and then you then look at the outcome of that decision, and maybe you change it. You know, but there are other things, and especially this, you know, working on yourself, that is really, really hard. So, keep improving. You know, strive for perfection. You'll never reach it, but you have to strive for it anyway. And I highly recommend these two Japanese movies about food and cooking, Jiro Dreams of Sushi and Tempopo, because as paradoxical as it may seem, these are actually movies about quality and about attaining quality, striving for perfection. And I found them incredibly inspiring. So there you go. Thank you for listening. And here are some contact data things, websites, and etc. And yeah, if you have any questions, then let me know.
Awesome, thank you very much, Jurie. Let me just click to keep your stuff up there. So if you have any questions, we've got a couple of minutes just to take a quick one, although none have come in yet. Right, here we go. Here's one. Before you were cut off, I had the impression you wanted to say something about the regular feedback that you get as a student, and you don't get any more later on. How do you deal with this?
Right. Yes, I did, and I never really was a student, so I dropped out of college very, very early on. And so it took me a long time to sort of realize that this was happening and deal with it. And also I had the good fortune of early on in my career of having someone who was a mentor to me, and who gave me my first job and then my second job, etc. So I think, in retrospect, what I should have done and what I guess you should do is try and actively look for a mentor and you know, approach that person and ask them to mentor, you know, in the nicest possible way. And if you're interviewing at a company, to ask about that. You know, do they have a mentoring system in place? Because at Roxa Vienna we had something. At least we had something that to help you find your way in a company. You know, even though it wasn't necessarily mentoring of your work.
Okay, there are no more questions coming in, and we really could do with getting on to the next session.
Cool.
I'd like to thank you again, Jurie, for Jurie actually stepped in at the last minute after one of our speakers had to pull out yesterday. So not only thank you for speaking, but thank you for saving our asses, really. For those of you who wanted to catch Brandy Grace, that's about to start, or maybe even has started. Bobby Anguilov is going to be in a couple of minutes, I think. So refresh the page, and we'll see you in a second.